Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
One of the most interesting developments in terms of our demographics in the United States that is leading to a changing America is just the whole shift of gender roles in our community. And what I mean by that precisely is that since 1989, there have been more ladies educated in the United States of America at higher education levels, college levels, since 1989 across all demographics. We've had this topic as conversation on our show before, and one of the big critiques that we had, well, that the round table was all ladies. Well, it was kind of highlighting what was going on really in the community at a national level. But this time around, we actually have a pretty well-balanced table with a lot of research. In fact, one of the most popular articles written on newstaco.com very recently was written by Dr. Joseph Villescas, an alumnus of the National Hispanic Institute, who also headed up the research efforts of the National Hispanic Institute not too long ago, is now the head of the Villescas Research, Media, and Instruction. We have him with us today, Dr. Joseph Villescas. And we also have the president of the National Hispanic Institute, Ernesto Nieto, regular commentator here on Fronteras. Also to talk about it, because we've seen a little bit of the same ongoings within the National Hispanic Institute as an organization, more young ladies being identified as top-notch students. And then on the other side of the table, we have Melissa Sambrano, who is a member of the Collegiate Leadership Network from the University of Texas at El Paso. And Melissa was actually part of our first conversation on this subject. And also we have joining us Carla Cuburu. And Carla is also from the University of Texas at El Paso, also a member of the Collegiate Leadership Network of the National Hispanic Institute. Big topic. Are ladies now running the world? And Melissa, the answer last time in our roundtable was,
yeah.
You better believe it.
Yep. We're coming up in the world. We're ready to take over.
Take over.
Yeah.
Like big words. Carla, you agree?
I do. It's just a simple, like this example, in all of my classes that you took this semester, they were mostly women. And these were upper division courses.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were all women, maybe a handful of guys, so.
What's going on? I mean, Ernesto, you've been around educational circles for a while. You have an organization that you've seen kind of develop over the years as having a similar phenomenon. In your opinion, what's going on?
I think they're right. I see. I don't see it as a competition. Pardon me. I don't think it's a takeover, like a hostile takeover. I think it's a long overdue process. And I think what we're seeing is young women educating themselves in much larger numbers with much higher competency levels. We're seeing the male who is not doing as well. I think we should talk about that as well. But I do believe that because of the phenomenon that's going on, by mere Darwinistic selection, that's a crazy word.
Wow, that's pretty loaded,
okay,
actually.
Social Darwinism. I think what's going on is that women are emerging. How they approach leadership in the Latino community, I think is worth discussion. I think what beliefs they bring to the table is another a part of the discussion. And I think how they perceive their roles and how to deal with the challenges that they're going to face as leaders who are women is worth another piece of the discussion. And I think they're going to come up with some answers. I think all of us are going to come up with some answers, yeah.
Joseph, you wrote an article on newstaco.com. Was pretty popular in terms of the readership that it got. Pretty controversial position that you kind of pointed to. So people would call it controversial. Explain what you found with some of your research and what kind of your...
I mean, you were saying yourself, from 89, actually closer to 99 is when you really began to see the turnover for the success rate for young ladies in the United States. And that's just on a macro level. What you have within the Latino community, though, is a very massive, just like within the African American population, a very massive gender gap that got inverted within the last 20 years. And how it's playing out, we only see it now on the graduate school level, on the undergraduate level. Particularly when I enrolled, there was 19 women and 3 gentlemen in my cohort. And so in most graduate fields, those that go tend to have, there's a higher rate now for women enrolling, but within the Latino community, it's very, very unlikely, particularly within the state of Texas, that Latino boys are going to go all the way within their education. And what we have right now is a critical mass that's forming of young Latinas who not only have advanced education, but also have this generational push for them to do more under extraordinary circumstances and to pull off greater feats as entrepreneurs, as leaders. And this is something that stems on multiple generations, but it's only now where this environment has opened up. It leads to hyper competition among Latinos within the United States, and at the same time it positions them to be our future leadership base, but in competition with an international cadre of young men. And that's where I really do wonder, are we preparing our American Latinos for this global dynamic where they will go against male counterparts, unlike in the United States?
Do you think that as young ladies in college right now, pretty bright ones at that, do you feel that this is a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's a great thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that women, when they take leadership positions, they're taking them for more personal reasons than men. I think men, not to bash on men, but a lot of men take jobs or careers or leadership positions for the money or for the title or for the recognition. And women have a belief system behind that. They have things that they're pushing for, like family, that they may not put out front, but that's just how we work. We're more connected with each other and with other people.
But you know, I mean, I don't disagree with that, but what I would take issue with is that...
Is this a disagreement?
No.
It sounds like a
This is
disagreement.
the part where I take issue with it, is that if there is this homogenous belief or this notion that that women leaders are going to do something in the same way, I'm trying to understand whether or not that will lead to any type of change in the future. And that's what we had been talking about for a long time. I think a whole inversion of a female leadership base happening within any community, the first question you have to ask is, will it be any different from the gender group that came before? And what I see right now is this is almost like a repeat of 40 years ago. And it's hyper competition, individualism, and even though there's supposed to be a chassis of, unity and collaboration, you see cutthroat. In the same way that the early Chicano movement or any other subgroup within Latino population, countercultural or new dynamics emerging, it is a repetition.
At this table, you're probably the person that could. Is this what's going on in your opinion? You were.
I've told people that I was born at the same time that Abraham Lincoln was born, and so I've been witness to things that I'm seeing, as he's saying, repeated over again. During the Chicano era, there was a lot of conflict. Yeah, people were getting better positions, better education, going to college, doing all that stuff, right? Being mobile. I see the women doing it now. It used to be, it was a competition for jobs in government. Now it's a competition for jobs in corporate America. Now it's a competition for elected positions. But it's very similar dynamics about who's first and what are we fighting for. At NHI, the philosophy that we're endorsing is, how does your development help impact Latino community life? Not how does your development prepare you for the war out there, but how does that prepare you to bolster our quality of life as Latinos? And what are the barriers that we're going to confront that together we're going to have to do something about, i.e. what's going on with Latino male education, as an example.
The first challenge that Latino leadership has to address is, if this gender gap continues, the long-term implications and really, disarray that will unfold within our community as it triples. I mean, we have enough issues to address as a whole, but this was one of the perfect storm factors that we talked about.
We've talked about that yeah.
So with all the other things that are happening with rapid expansion, it is a new and untested and young leadership base that will enter this with only academic training as the tool to interpret all these complexities within the United States and elsewhere. And I just don't feel that, even though we have the success within the educational system, that any of these educational models are going to prepare you directly for this. It's never been prioritized in that, and those degrees aren't intended for it. So how do you learn how to be the leaders of tomorrow? And how do you take on more challenges?
Within the context of Latino community life, yeah.
And that's where I think it is up to everyone, the elder women and the elder males and the younger folks all together, to prepare this new generation of leaders for an even greater challenge ahead.
I'm kind of curious, Melissa, you said it was a great thing. Carla, you kind of nodded your head, and kind of said, yeah. Joseph and Ernesto are talking about cannibalization of sorts that could be detrimental. Are you in agreement and not in agreement? I mean, these are some pretty big arguments that are being leveraged here.
I think that Ernie's right. I don't know. I don't think I'm in the midst of fighting for positions yet to see exactly how the competition is or how cutthroat it is, but ideally I'd like to think that with women as leaders there'd be more solidarity, more compassion, I guess, more looking at changing lives instead of getting to the next position. But what I'm hearing from you guys is that it's not that way. It's still the competition, still the I'm just going to cut you down so I can get to this position.
Well, what are the reasons why males aren't doing so well? Is it that women are more compassionate, more community oriented, and that's why they're choosing to go to college? Or
no, they're the total opposite of those who are teaching the classroom. They're the
yes,
and that's the problem. No. Well, I'm saying
Whoa.
I want to hear this. Yeah, I'm kind of curious.
Joseph's idea is that because women teach, are teachers.
There's a
I want to hear her.
Because the women are teachers, that's why girls have an advantage in classrooms. Because
I don't.
The boys don't relate
what
as
I would
well,
say
or
is that
because the
there's
women are
there's
biased.
a disconnect between those who become professional educators in terms of gender and race, than those who are in the lowest position in terms of performance, which are African American boys and Latino boys. It is easier to reward students that match your cultural profile and your pedagogy and everything else, and it takes more work to work with this different type of male student. And over 2 or 3 decades of this.
So you're suggesting that
I'm suggesting that there's a
teachers-
fast track. It's easy to identify lower performing Latino and African American boys in such a manner where you put a very massive population in remediation, and that pushes them out of the system.
that's very deficit based.
No, but I'm saying that it's empirically valid.
Well, there's a debate here.
I want in on this one.
Yeah, but I was going to ask, you see this kind of development at NHI over the course of time. I mean, you and I have had conversations on prior occasions on how NHI began with a particular mission, and over time, more and more ladies have been selected, identified, and participated in NHI programs, which NHI as an organization inherently selects the top, brightest minds from 7 countries. So does that mean that there's an issue with Latino males?
Let me first establish that I'm not talking against the Holy Grail, okay? I get a little upset that anytime there is a different opinion, that the older women tend to think of it as a gender argument. I care less about the gender argument from that point of view. I care about the gender argument from the standpoint of, women bring a different type of understanding of leadership that I believe is going to be highly beneficial to the Latino community. Are they going to encounter similar dynamics, similar competition issues as Joseph? Yeah, absolutely. I was earlier in my career, I've spent a lot of time dealing with young women who want to run for public office and help them understand how to diffuse an argument that attacks them. Okay? Rather than react, how do you diffuse the argument effectively and cause the attention to kind of be driven towards the person asking the question? So I have a little bit of familiarity. My concern is, I believe to support his argument, is that the preponderance of females in education has shifted the attention away from boys. At one time, I mean, I'm 71 years old, okay? I was in Cohen Elementary School. I rarely saw a woman. In elementary, I'd see them a lot. In junior high, less. In high school, even less. The reverse is true now. Probably some males are seen in elementary, but it spares. What does that mean to the identity formation of a person? What are the cues? I have 7 granddaughters and 1 grandson, and I watch them play together, And the issue is always, please include Pablo, because the first thing they tell Pablo, you can't be admitted into our room. Now, that's a personal family thing with me. And Pablo walks away crying, and I get concerned that my granddaughters don't do anything bad by it. They share something in common. Why is it that they do that? Am I blaming women? No, I'm describing a phenomenon. I think that phenomenon is in the classroom. Unstated as it may be, unintended as it may be, I think it is contributing to the decline of the academic achievement of the Latino male. We already have an identification issue, a role issue. It's been confused now. We're no longer sure of what does it mean to be a Latino male.
I would agree. And by that I mean, I
But
grasp.
that's not to attack
I
what's
grasp.
going on right now.
No,
I
yeah.
wanna make sure.
I have, and this is part of what, going back to this article, that there was this notion of identity and leadership that was male driven. It was patriarchy, you know, like just in essence. And it is a Cold War model that ended with the Cold War. And right at the same time as that identity had been propagated, you have this shift, and this is the era where we go to college. You have multiculturalism, and you have a different type of inclusion model that all comes together. And there is no longer this, and this you see, and NHI is a microcosm of this larger phenomena. You don't see that aggressiveness or that leadership base or that volunteer rate or that extra commitment from the boys. You see it from the girls. You see it in every level.
Exponentially from
In every level, from the success in just making through the process of applying, to having self-direction throughout these programs, to taking on leadership roles, and then your last roundtable, to growing new elements of the organization.
Is there a responsibility on now the ladies then to
That's what I was thinking. So if you're saying that this phenomenon is happening because, well, just naturally, obviously, and then so boys aren't as successful academically or even afterwards because there's so many women in the classrooms, would it be our job as Latino female leaders of the future to kind of attack that problem? And because education is so vital and like such a basis of where we come from and where we go after this, would it be our job to kind of try to find a balance in the education system as to females and male teachers?
I'm going to try to give you a metaphor.
Uh-huh.
It's not because it's a gender responsibility. I want to make sure that these are human
Okay, not just
experiences.
for all Latino.
Yeah, these are
all
just
Latino
human
leaders.
experiences for people who want to be in leadership roles shaping societies. And you are in leadership roles shaping societies. Let's just say that's a truism. I was with the president of the Dominican Republic, and as we were talking, and I looked at him and I said, so how are you going to control the rise of your underclass in your country? Okay, and he looked at me in a very frank manner, and I said, because your work industry is primarily driven by tourism, right? And he said this, he said, all of our intellectuals are huge leadership, potential leaders, are in private schools. And it represents a tiny slice of our society. The rest are out here trying to make it as taxi cab drivers, shoe shine people, work in department stores. Our country will never be able to attract major industry, okay? It will never be able to create wealth for itself because we don't have the intellectual wherewithal to take advantage of the opportunities.
Right.
I think that that's the same phenomenon that faces the Latino community. If we have only one facet of it that's developed, but you have a much larger facet up here of underdeveloped people, then we're never going to make any progress. The critical core of intellectuals and intellectual developed people will profit. There's no doubt about it. But at what expense? And I think that's a phenomenon you face as future leaders because it's not as large. In my time, in the 60s, what was the percentage of Latinos? About 5%? You know, we were inconsequential. We have a huge gorilla out there today, you know, and how do you deal with that massive developing population that's not only in the United States, but is global? Just go to Brazil, just go to Mexico, just go any place, and you see the impact of the underdeveloped.
So based on that, I mean, I agree. So looking at all of these phenomena, all of this phenomena that's ongoing, we have future leaders at this table, current leaders at this table. What's the starting point? I mean, if the consensus around the table is that, okay, there is at least a mutual agreement in that males are falling behind, kind of seen in some aspects as a victory of sorts for ladies and what they've been able to achieve over the course of time, but then presenting significant obstacles for our future has been articulated here. Where do we jump from at this point?
I think at this point it's much like what we've talked about before when there was a change in the racial order of who's the largest, and Latinos kind of leaped beyond African American populations. It was like, oh, this is an incredible victory, but now we have tremendous responsibility. Although there's this heightened performance, believe it or not, it doesn't match the national average. So there's still a ways to go among Latina educational performance, tremendously. And there's still an income disparity. And by the way, as you look at this, for the next 20 years of your development pursuing leadership, you're in competition with pre-existing male leaders.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like the switch has been, there is a trend.
Right, there's no more change.
But what's fascinating though is that baby boomer generation of male leaders within our community, in the end, I see high level of investment in your generation of young ladies, simply because there's a clear recognition that if the work that needs to get done is extraordinarily challenging and complex, that Latinas from our community have the wherewithal, the intellectual capacities, the care, and the devotion to focus on addressing issues in a manner that aren't myopic but are long-term in nature. And I see more of this emerging leadership base that is being well prepared for these challenges.
Your thoughts?
It was discussed in the last panel, like this mind shift, I guess, and what like the gender role should be for a woman. I think that's what's caused this like new phenomena, I guess, where women want to like they've decided like, I don't have to be married by 2021. I don't have to have children at that age. I can actually I can continue my education. I can go as far as I want and not have to be, settled down or whatnot. And I think there's more and more of these like women, I guess, popping up across the spectrum of Latino education, female education, that's going to cause like a greater, I guess, enthusiasm for other Latinas, and it's going to keep, further, it's going to keep expanding, it's going to keep pushing them, and I think we'll be able to take on those challenges, we'll be able to match the success of past male leaders. So I think seeing, an example in your classrooms, it kind of just gives you an extra push, and I think it's going to continue to expand and grow.
But we are still a generation or two away where this concept of normal, of success and excellence and won't really be entrenched for another 20 years. Like where you are right now, or this generation of women, don't necessarily have the backing of a previous generation of women understanding the complexities and challenges that it means to go this road. So on top of your own journey, and this is something that I know we've talked about before, there is still, particularly within our cultural mode, an expectation for you to remain somewhat traditional. Not entirely, but there's, and you were just talking about this a moment ago, the challenge for any leader, male or female, is that life will get in the way of your own leadership. Families will form, people will die. There's things that we are always connected to, but I find it fascinating that this massive and growing professional base and entrepreneurs and of leaders, of young women, are facing these particular challenges for life decisions to be made at 25 or at 30 in such a way that does not bode well.
I'm getting uncomfortable, very uncomfortable, and the reason I'm getting uncomfortable, and I've got to give you a personal story.
Yeah.
I have a daughter with 3 children, right? And she's a leader in our organization, and yet I see the additional burdens that are being placed on her, of being the provider of those kids, the education, having to be at a meeting, carrying a child, all those things. I think that part of the answer is going to be the re-education of the male. I think that we're going to have to be taught, forget about sensitivity, about sharing in that responsibility in a much more profound way than we've ever thought of ourselves doing. Caring for our families in a very different way than no, que la vieja haga todo, and that cannot work anymore. And so, yeah, we have some unlearning to do, a lot of unlearning as males. And I, having 7 granddaughters, Do I want them to be simply the caretakers? Absolutely not.
The
And-
woman is still seen as the homemaker and the primary caretaker of the children,
And the man is like the one who brings home like the money.
yeah, and even though it's getting to that point, it's still not a joint process.
I brought up the topic because I know that for NHI's Collegiate Leadership Network, it has been something that's been on the agenda, kind of a debate going back and forth between the men and women that are currently in college. And I know in one of our future shows, we're going to be having a roundtable discussion with the men's side, the men's response to this from NHI. But it's also been something that NHI as an organization has been kind of seeing develop, and Joseph, you've certainly done significant research on it as well, both for NHI and on your own, for your own research organization. Ernesto, what has been your response to it? It's at the last minute, but what has been your response to it as a national, international organization?
That we have a lot of, we've talked about the unlearning process. And we've talked to people, you and I have, in the educational business. There's no simple solution to anything. We have to be able to ask the kinds of profound questions that illuminate new possibilities. And until we're able to do that, we're going to come up with simplistic answers. In the 1990s, and I'll be very quick about this, there was a concern over how many women were in leadership roles in NHI during our programs. And it was so simplistic as to be bothersome to me. I think we have a totally different generation of thought to give attention to.
Folks, this is certainly one of the biggest discussions that our community is facing over the course of the next few years. And we're certainly going to try to continue to have this debate. Thank you for joining us this evening. For all of us here at Fronteras, I'm Hector H. Lopez. Have a good evening.